All right, all right. Welcome back to the Black Mind Garden podcast, where we are remapping minds so you can create a life you design. I am here today with a friend and the founder of mycatplan.com, David Simmons. Actually, David, this is not the first time we've had a podcast conversation, is it? I feel like we've had a podcast conversation in the past. Have we not? It's been a minute. Yeah.
It's been a minute. We had a conversation about research. The
Yes, I remember. I remember now.
Yes,
Like, I feel like we've had a
yes,
conversation before. So, I like to bring some of the best conversations. I like to bring people back because this is the way we run this podcast. We have important, impactful conversations. But today, David is here. We're having a different kind of conversation. Now, if you don't remember, David is a former marketing manager in the toy industry. Now, he has since transitioned into helping people to create their life plans. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the
yeah.
importance of creating our life plans, particularly our end of life plans. It's a very uncomfortable conversation to have sometimes, and it doesn't have to be with a little planning. So I am welcoming back to the show David Simmons. Hey.
Hey, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me back. I'm really excited to tell people about what we're doing and how it can really help them. So no, this is really great, especially in this time and this session, this season of life for a lot of people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, I'd love for you to share just a little bit about, um, you and how you
sure.
transitioned into this space.
Yeah, so as you said earlier, I used to be a marketing manager in the toy industry for many, many years. And what happened was my father passed away, and it kind of opened up my eyes. And in him passing away, I kind of learned a lot about end of life planning because a lot of the information that we needed, we did not have. And so with my marketing background and my analytics background, I was like, look, I don't want this to happen to anyone else. So I kind of started on this journey of how to create something that will help those like myself who didn't have access to any of these plans or even know what to do, to give them an opportunity to make sure that their families are prepared, because there are many families that are not prepared.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, especially in the Black community, because
Mhm.
you can kind of see it based upon our net worth is going down. So by 2054, we'll have a zero net worth, which is crazy. And
Yeah.
so that's because we're not passing down our property the right
Mhm.
way. Our
Mhm.
homes are being, so it's very interesting. It's heartbreaking, but we can make a difference and we can make a change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely an important conversation we need to be having. And I think that, one of the first things to really think about is, or to point at, is like, why is this uncomfortable in the first place? Like, this is such, for some people, and I think particularly for our community,
Yeah.
it's a conversation that we tend to avoid. And why do you think that is?
Mhm. Well, I think it's definitely cultural, right? So it's one of those things where grandma will hide the money and underneath the mattress, and it's like that's one thing we don't talk about. She would probably take care of everything, but we would never know where the paperwork is
Mhm.
at. So I think it's something that's just been passed down through generations, and sometimes you just don't know. You don't know about a living trust or advanced directives until something happens, and then you're not being proactive, you're being reactive,
Mhm.
and it's not a really good place to be in. So most of the times it's a very uncomfortable conversation, and our goal, which is why I call it comfort action plan,
Mhm.
to make it comfortable for people to actually have the conversation, to put their information into our cap plan so that their family can quickly get to their life insurance information and everything that they actually need in order to help them in a crisis or at a time of their passing, where they can easily pass down their assets. And, because looking for this stuff is in looking for this information while you're dealing with trauma is
Mhm.
the hardest thing, because you're already grieving, and now you have to separate yourself and your emotions and actually try to find information at that point, and that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of
Yeah.
trauma, I think you made a good point. Like, this is a cultural thing, why it's not talked about. And I was just thinking as you were speaking about, just like historically speaking, death in our community was such a traumatic thing. If you
Yeah.
think if you think back to, the times of enslavement, and death was often abrupt and sudden, and there was no planning, and it was traumatic.
Mhm.
And so, you think about like how this culturally has been passed down to us to not talk about the death, just as a way to cope, just as a way to
Yeah.
keep moving. And so now I think it's important because we are successful. We do have
Hmm.
property and have bank accounts and have things that we could pass down, and we do want to cultivate that generational wealth. And so
Right.
we have to begin to resolve those fears and resolve some of that old trauma, such so that we
Hmm.
can begin to create new legacies for the people in our lives. And so I think that's just an important piece to bring, for people who are not used to talking about death. Yeah, it's not comfortable talking about, but the fact of the matter is it's going to happen. Like everyone
It's gonna, yeah.
is going to die.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone is going to die. There's only one way out of here.
Right,
So,
exactly.
and there's a way to do it where you're honoring your family, you're honoring yourself,
Mhm.
you're passing down not just your assets, but you're actually passing down your wisdom and your knowledge. Because what we do is not just, hey, here is a place where you can put your information, but we also have a journal where you can pass down your principles of what you live by, that
Mhm.
that could be passed down through generations. We also have what is called endless comfort cards.
Mhm.
So during that time, that your loved ones are there without you because you passed away, but you can still encourage them by having these cards for those special moments,
Mhm.
for that first year. Because the first year is the hardest year ever,
Mhm.
because your first birthday without your parent, your first Christmas, your first, in their birthday without, being without them is very tough.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is not just on the asset side and the financial side, but also from the emotional side as well. Like, hey, we're gonna make sure that you're supported all the way through this process.
Yeah, and
So
and it's and
yeah.
even though you speaking about it from the context of parents, I mean, this really could be anyone. This could be,
Mhm.
your intimate partner. It could be it could even be, God forbid, someone's child. It could
Yeah.
be, sister, brother, cousin. It could be anyone that
Mhm.
you're close to, where that you may be the executor of that person's estate, or
Yep.
you just may want to have speaking of the comfort card specifically, have those comfort cards. But if you're the executor of someone's state, or if you're the next what's the power of attorney, and you're responsible
Right.
for uh, their estate, then there needs to be a conversation called, what would you like to pass down? What legacy would
Exactly.
you like to leave? And I love that,
Right.
in terms of the way you have created the comfort action plan, it gives you the layers of things. I think it is very important um, to put those assets in, and to couple
Mhm.
that with the emotional. Now, I'll say, just from personal experience and from what I've heard when I talk to people, is that putting down, like knowing what to put down and putting down all of that information, can be very overwhelming. How do
Yeah.
you feel like that can be made a little bit more simple?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about putting anything into a document is usually you see these fields and they're just fields on a white piece of paper, or even if it's online,
Mhm,
right? And so what we decided to do is take a different approach.
mhm,
So we decided to say, hey, look, looking at beautiful pictures and being in a place of comfort, is very important. You get a lot more work done when you're in a comfortable space. Like, one of
mhm,
the things I love to do is go to this great place in Palos Verdes in LA, where it's a resort and you're overlooking the ocean, and I use that as my office sometimes just to get away. And it's amazing how much work you actually get done. So what we decided to do is incorporate different types of backgrounds to kind of help you focus on getting this done. Because the first thing you want to do is look away, not even do it. So, but if you're looking at something that's very beautiful and picturesque,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of and aligns with where you love to be, like the beach. So we have a beach theme.
Mm-hmm.
And so the beach theme is overlaid with all of the different input fields, but you feel like you're not doing something heavy. You
Yeah.
feel like, oh my gosh, this is actually pretty easy to do. I actually want to be here and finish this off,
Mm-hmm.
because the reward of finishing this off is like being at the beach,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, having you have your time back. You have more time and energy to spend with your family, because now you finish that most important work, and now you can start living more with purpose, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what we did. We incorporate different backgrounds.
I think it's kind of brilliant, because there's sort of like a subconscious and unconscious message of peace, or whatever that background is, that's luxury or whatever that background is. There's this unconscious message of being empowered inside of doing something that feels a little bit heavier. And so, yeah, I really like that. One of the things that I notice, of course, I have the comfort action plan, and am endeavoring to fill this out. Is I think that one of the things that make it, there, first of all, I think different people do things different ways, but I will share from a personal standpoint. For me, when I have to do a lot of things, a lot of information, I think it's important to break it down into manageable chunks. So for people who are like big picture, people where a lot of details overwhelm them, it's useful to break it down in manageable chunks. And I think that the time has to be blocked off, right?
Yes.
Because it's
Yes.
easy to say, oh, well, I'll get to it. I'll do it later. But what I think is important is to prioritize it by putting it in the calendar and making it,
Yeah.
like blocking off a certain amount of time per day or per week to do it until it's done. And then there are some people that it's like, you know what, I want to just sit down for a couple of hours and get it all done in one fell swoop. So tell me a little bit about what your perspective is on that.
No, I think it's good. I mean, one of the things that I'm going to start doing is having more like a drip campaign to those who order it later on, where they're getting, I would say, we're helping them to go through it one step at a time, so that they don't have to feel alone doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, probably in October, we're going to start doing a weekly program where people can actually buy the CAP plan, and then we all do it together. So they don't have to feel alone when they're doing it. And so we kind of do these in stages, because I had a friend of mine, and she said, she's like, David, this is a great product. However, I don't want to do it by myself. This seems, I know it may seem weird, but I don't want to do this alone. And so, well, it'd be great for you to get your family on, and all get on the Zoom. We can all do it together that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's great about it is that it allows them to also see, and also make sure that they have their stuff together, because most likely most people are pulled into other families emergencies anyway. It's like, okay, well, we know that David knows what he's doing, or we know that George or John knows what he's doing, or Sarah knows what she's doing. Let's get her over here and help us do this. Where Sarah, John, or George, David could actually help them, with their planning. So it really lightens that person's load by showing other people what to do and how to do it. So it's important.
Yeah.
But yes, blocking that time out, being able to do that is vitally important. But doing it together, you may find even more comfort.
It's interesting, because I never thought of it. I never thought of that. Like, oh yeah, like we could do it together. And I think that's brilliant. Like, to have CAP parties, like comfort action plan
Yeah.
parties. And again, that's just reframing the way you think
Mhm.
about doing this work. Whether you get, I think it's probably very effective to get up and do this work with your family. Like, hey, let's all get on a Zoom, or, oh, hey, let's all come over, let's have dinner together, and let's all create our
Yeah.
comfort action plans together. Because then you start to have conversation that maybe you've never had before with your family. Like, oh, this is what
Mhm.
I want. This is what I wanted. This is how. This is, as you're doing the work. And it kind of lightens it, especially if you're doing it over dinner, over dessert,
Mhm.
good food, right? But the
Hey,
other
good
piece,
food and great music. Yeah.
and great music, right? And then the other piece is, maybe there are some people whose families will refuse to engage that conversation. And so having
Mhm.
a comfort action plan party with maybe friends, or sometimes even with people you don't know. Sometimes it is
Mhm.
even easier to have these conversations and to think about this with other people who are not people that but have similar interests, or have this alignment. And then what you can start to get ideas of things you may not have thought of before, and then maybe go discuss it with
Right.
your family then. So I think it's like kind of brilliant, this idea of having comfort action plan parties or gatherings to be able to uh, lighten the conversation of transition, as
Yeah.
it already is. And because I think,
Right.
just like you alluded to earlier, it's just, and working in a hospital during my residency and seeing people come in who didn't have advanced directives, and seeing how the family struggled, and sometimes
Oh man.
fought, and
Yeah.
like, just the worst. It brings out the worst in people to have to discuss these things, because, like you said, they're already grieving.
Yeah.
But then, everybody wants to hold on to, in some way, that family member, so that attachment manifests
Oh man.
in these different
It's
ways.
Yeah, yes. I mean, recently my cousin's husband experienced this with his sister,
Hmm.
and her advanced directive was very clear: do not resuscitate.
Hmm.
I do not want to be on a trach. I
Hmm.
just want to just go.
Hmm.
And what happened was they couldn't find that advanced directive, and she suffered for a month.
Oh my God.
I mean, her part of her brain had to be taken. It was just bad, all
Hmm.
just overall.
Hmm.
But she had the advanced directive, but she wasn't the people that needed to have it didn't have it either. So having an advanced directive is important, but you have to make sure that the people who are involved also has a copy of that advanced directive,
Yeah.
so they can do what's best for that person.
Yeah. That's so
And
important.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's almost important. That's almost more important than even doing the dang thing, because what good
yeah,
is
it is.
putting all this work in if it's somewhere hidden where and not accessible, where the person who needs it can have it.
Right, right. You sit there, it's like, well, why? Well, like advanced directives, we also talk about life insurance policies.
Hmm.
I think there's like $7 billion in unclaimed life insurance policies that's out there
Wow.
because their loved one never shared it with their beneficiaries.
Yeah.
And so it's like, look, these things are you took the time out to do advanced directives, to do life planning or end of life planning,
Yeah.
and you need to make sure that all that work is not in vain
Right.
and is given to the people who is supposed to have it and can execute on your wishes.
Right.
And so that's vitally important. I mean, yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, it's a lot of work. And look, I'm not saying that it's easy sometimes. Like even right now, my mom, because I'm going through this process with my mom in terms of hospice, who's in
Hmm.
hospice right now, unfortunately. And I'm using my own template for it's the CAP plan, but a part of it is also it's called the life plan, where
Yeah.
you're planning out that person's life and their life celebration. I would say their funeral, right? So I remember so I was like, okay, I have to be proactive, because what happened was my mom had a stroke and she was unable to speak, and then things kind of went downhill for the last we'll say for a couple of months. So now I'm living out what it is designed that I'm designed to help others. And when I opened up that template, I tell you, I was like, oh my God, thank you.
Hmm.
Because although I know all this information, I didn't know the first step until I opened up that plan.
Yeah.
And I created it. It's like I created it, and I didn't know the first thing to do until I opened it up. And I was like,
Right.
oh my gosh, I'm so happy that even if I created it for myself, I'm
Yeah.
happy that I created it.
Yeah.
and but it allowed me to get going, it allowed me to actually start that process, and it's been a tremendous amount of help, a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of
Yeah.
help, and
That's, I mean, first of all, just sending you love just around your mom. I mean, we've
thank
had
you.
some conversations, and I'm always sending you love around your mom and your family. Um,
Yeah,
I think it's just brilliant that it's unfortunate circumstance, but brilliant that you're able to like really see the the impact that you're going to create. Like,
yeah,
the benefits of what you've created. You are your first, in fact, testimony. Unfortunately, so,
yeah.
and you know, it is what it is. And but you get to know for yourself, this works.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this process, because I remember as I'm doing it, I'm thinking about my customers as well,
Mhm.
and thinking about the people who will be going through my same situation.
Yeah.
And first of all, I felt like, oh my God, I didn't feel overwhelmed. That's the one thing. I felt like, okay, this is not hard. Okay, all I do is input the information.
Yeah.
And that felt really great, but also went through the ups and downs of the emotions. So the first thing I felt was, it didn't feel heavy until you start putting the information in.
Of
The
course.
realization started hitting, and then, but what it did for me was it allowed me to be very present with my mom.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is like, oh my gosh, I was just checking boxes with
Hmm.
her on a daily basis. When you start at the end, what are the things how do I want to be present with her?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it made me very present
Yeah.
to say, I changed my morning routine with her.
Hmm.
My morning routine is like, hey, mom, you want something to eat? You good? You done? You're okay. Right now it became, huh, mom, it's good to see you today. I
Hmm.
love you. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. I'm
Hmm.
glad you're here. And it changed the framework for me by actually doing this. I know it's hard and it's difficult, but it allowed me to be absolutely present with her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. I think it's important when we fill out these plans, coming a little bit back to the accessibility piece, to know who needs to have these. Who do we need to be leaving them with? How do we make them accessible? Right? I would imagine um,
right.
the primary care provider is one, right? I think that
Mhm.
your primary care provider needs to have at least the advanced directives proportion of it, right? So
Right.
that's important. But then you how do you what are some ways that that's this, and again, this is the
Yeah.
primary care only has the advanced directives, because I know there's a lot of other personal things that
Right.
are in the comfort action plan. So just like parsing out that advanced directives piece, and pulling that out and sending that to your doctors. But what who else, like, how do you make this accessible, and what are some structures that you advise people to put in place once they have filled this out?
Yeah. So my recommendation is that they give a copy to anyone that's their beneficiaries that are going to have to execute on anything that's in their comfort action plan.
Right.
Right. So along with the comfort action plan, if you have a living trust, and you want to, anything that belongs to someone who's going to execute, I won't say belongs to, but anything that is being executed on your behalf by a loved one or friend or
Hmm.
whoever it may be, or partner, you want
Hmm.
to make sure that they actually have a physical copy of it or even a digital copy of it. And if you have it on your computer, just make sure that, hey, here's my password to get
Right.
on. And some people's computers are all over the place. Their windows have bazillion folders,
Right.
right? So you may want to put it on a USB and do it that way as well, which we will be offering later on in the year. Our USBs that are focused on the CAT plan, so you can just plug it in. They know what it is. It would have all information that's on USB that will direct them on what this is for, and what to do.
I like the idea of the USB because of the fact that computers have multiple passwords, two-factor authentication, all the things, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
having a USB, having it maybe even emailed to a person so they have it in their inbox, but also having
Mm-hmm.
that USB and maybe like a fire safe lockbox or something like that, where the people know where the key is another
Mm-hmm.
place. I think that that's very, very useful information to know. I think what's also important, as you talked about giving it to your beneficiary, is to decide who the beneficiaries are
Yeah.
going to be. Who is the beneficiary?
Yeah.
Who's the backup beneficiary?
Yes. Yeah.
Like have like a backup and a backup to the backup, because maybe the beneficiary
Yeah. I mean,
is not around.
anything can happen.
Yeah.
Anything can happen, right? So it's more of, you both brothers could go on a fishing trip, and they're the only ones who are benefiting from their mother's passing or whatever it may be, right? So what happens to that money? Where does it go? Because
Mhm.
that's the immediate family. They don't have anyone else, and
Right.
so that can actually be passed down to your cousins and
Mhm.
second cousins and everything else. So yeah, it is very important that that you have thirds and fourths and fifths.
Right.
Yeah,
And in addition, power of attorneys. Who's your first
yeah.
power of attorney? Who's your second, option?
Hmm.
Because if and have conversations with those people and make sure they're okay being your power of attorney.
Yeah,
Because I think that it's important that sometimes people just put names down, right? And that we don't even know if that person wants to serve in that capacity, or can, or has the
yeah.
capacity to. Or, you want to pick a power of attorney who is going to absolutely follow your wishes, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
it,
No, I had that experience with my dad where, he didn't want to trach in, he didn't want to have a trach. And so I discovered that he had a power of attorney just by a fluke.
mhm,
And I was like, oh, I'm second in power of attorney, and this is not what he wanted. Like, okay, well, let's go ahead and have a family discussion about this, because that's exactly what's happening, what he
right,
doesn't want.
mhm,
Right. And so the interesting thing about that scenario, I was going to have that discussion, but he ended up passing that same day.
mhm,
But yeah, it's very important that the people that you give your power of attorney to can have, and the people, how
oh yeah,
family is, how
yep,
if someone's going, it's going to be too emotional, they can't handle
yep,
it. Someone who is more rock stone and solid,
mhm,
they'll deal with the emotion part of it later.
yep,
You want someone to be able to say, this is what needs to be done. I know how I feel,
mhm,
but how I feel doesn't matter. What matters is what my loved one wants.
exactly, exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
Well, gosh,
yeah,
I mean, I love this conversation. I think that, some of the take home points, like we got to have these conversations about what we want. We have to
yes,
start dealing with our fears, moving through our fears around having conversations about end of life and what we want. I love your comfort action plan, like the how you have the layout such that you have these overlay backgrounds to make it feel differently while you're filling out this information. I love the idea of the parties, the
yeah,
gathering. I think that is just so brilliant, so key, and that opening this comfort action plan and all the levels, all the layers of information that you're putting in advance, that
mhm,
causes when you open the documents to be like, okay, here's the first thing, here's the second thing. Like you don't have to think about it
yeah,
as a loved one who's grieving, because someone has done that for you. And for those who are filling out the plan, that's who you need to be thinking about. Think about the
yeah,
person who's going to have to manage when you're gone, because it's not going to be you, because you're going to be gone.
mm-mm,
So how much easier would you like to make it for that person so that they can be present, so they can grieve in a way that heals, so that you can have your wishes carried out, so you don't have people fighting over stuff, because it
right,
is stuff, and so that your own end of life wishes can be carried out. Like I think that's just so important. And finally, you know, who needs to have it, because let's not do all of this work and then not have it be accessible.
Yes. Right.
That is no, it's not good. It's not good at all.
No, it's not good at all. No.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, these are some of the things that I'm taking away for the audience, and of course for myself. I mean, like, there are some things that, it's like, stuff, but then you forget about it, right? It's like, oh yeah, I need to make sure this thing is accessible when I actually fill it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, because we go throughout a day and very systematic or automatic, almost like on automatic, I would say,
Right.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we're just thinking that everyone has access to our computers or to whatever it is that we have, but that's not the case. It's like the first thing you got to look is probably at the file cabinet,
Right.
But having something that is like, okay, hey, here's my information. It's on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
This is this is my password.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and here's the folder.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's right there.
Right.
So yeah, so having it readily accessible is vitally important.
Very good. Very, very good. Well, man, I mean, I think this has been a lot to think about. Some very good information.
Yeah.
I think it's very useful. I think what you're doing is so impactful. And I appreciate you for lining up this action plan, and for your creativity in executing some of these potential gatherings, and guidance to people around
Oh yeah.
this work. And so I'd love for you to share with the listeners and the audience, how can they get in touch with you to get their comfort action plan?
Sure, absolutely. So you can just go to mycapplan.com. That's mycapplan.com. And you can go there, and it's all the action plans are there. It's very simple to navigate, and you can always reach out to me as well. So
And we will have David's information in the show notes. So if you need to reach out to him directly with any questions about the CAP plan, that you can do that. But go to mycapplan.com and go ahead and purchase your CAP plan today. Do you already have? Now, when we were talking a couple of months ago, the
sure.
the um, the USBs were on their way out. Are they out now? Are they available now? Or do you have a date
Not yet.
to be available?
Yeah, most likely we're looking more towards the end of October
Okay.
or the first month of or early November. So just in time for really the holidays.
The holidays. Oh
So
yeah.
so you can do this with your family, especially if you're especially for Thanksgiving and Christmas and all those things. You can kind of sneak that in and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I know you need to get this done. You may not want to talk about it, but
Mm-hmm.
here you go.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good. So for those there's going to be two different, just as from a logistical standpoint to the audience who's listening, there are two different releases. Some of you have seen this video, and then we're going to re-release it audio. Just know that if you're listening to this and it's after October or mid-November, you will be able to get your USB version. Hey.
Absolutely.
All right. So I think that's very important for people to know. Good. Go to mycapplan.com, y'all. Download your CAP plan. Start to fill it out now. If you want the USB, download it, fill it out, and then order the USB later.
Exactly. And there you go.
Well,
Yep.
all right, David, it's been wonderful to have this conversation with you, even though, and you have a way, and you have a way of making these difficult conversations feel just a little bit lighter.
Okay.
They are heavy conversations. They are difficult conversations. And even with you, sort of living through it right now, you still have this gift of having the conversation be just a little bit lighter, so that people feel motivated to go and do this. This is a very important legacy that we're leaving here.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me again.
Aha, it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. Listen, y'all, you need to share this episode because this is a conversation that is so important. We are talking about creating legacy, leaving, creating end of life wishes. We're talking about so many different things that are important around end of life planning. And so please just share this episode with, 2 or 3 people and ask them to share it with 2 or 3 people. And this is the way we get ripples that make waves that actually transform lives. So share this episode and you'll see again mycatplan.com. You'll see that in our show notes. You can reach out to David directly. And of course, if you're not already subscribed to the Black Mind Garden, you need to be, because these are the kind of conversations we're having that are here to empower you and transform your life. So thank you once again, David.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you
Yes.
again.
Again, sending lots of love to you, to your family, with regard to your mom. And yes, we'll just keep you in our prayers.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. All right, y'all. We will be seeing you on the next episode. And until then, you stay empowered.